Hello and welcome back to the channel. It's been a while since I've made an environment, so let's just make that today. I want to get back into it. I haven't made an environment in such a long time. So in this video, we'll just do that. So I'm going to open up Blender and just start a new scene. And for this video, I want to make a snowy environment because it's pretty tough to make something like that. And it's winter time, so it's not snowing here. Yesterday was actually pretty sunny out, but still, I just want to think about snow. So, alright, so delete the default cube and save the file. I bought a pack from Big, Medium, Small, which is really cool. So let's make like a snowy mission from like Modern Warfare 2. I think that would be pretty cool. Alright, so add in a plane, then scale it to whatever. I think like 100 meters. It's fine. And we're just going to subdivide this about 99 times, just so we have 100 subdivisions, and then we can subdivide once more, so we have a subdivision for every meter. Should be good for now. And then we can add in some displacement. So the way I like to do that is just add in a displace modifier, then click on new and go over to the texture, and then search for a nice mountainous area or whatever I need, and then just load that in as a height map. So I have already made some height maps myself, and I hope this will be a good one. I think I can release these on my Patreon. If you want them, you can just download them there. But yeah, it's a 4K texture. Let's see. It is not really mapping correctly. We can use the UV instead of the local, and then just select our UV map, then increase the strength and just go over to the UVs to get rid of those edges. Shrink them down a little bit, just so they don't clip near the edges. Just set the mid-level to 0. Now that I think of it, this can probably be a hill in the background or a mountain. So just scale it like that. 500 meters should be fine. Something like this, just so we can look at it from a distance. And this might actually be a nice angle. Really flat ground here, so that's really cool. You can just discover some camera angles by messing around, which is actually why I love making environments. I can just start just like this and then get an idea without having to think about it beforehand. So let's set the camera resolution to, let's do ultra wide, and then let's subdivide this once more. Get a little bit more detail. I think we can handle that. So now we have a nice mountain outline, and I want a guy here. So I'm going to place my 3D cursor there, open up my asset browser, and in here I have my BMS library, which contains the guys I want to use. We have these hazmat guys, and we have a flamethrower guy, and just normal soldier. And I think for this one we're just going to be using a normal soldier or the flamethrower guy. That might be a cool contrast. Snowy environments can be really tough to render because of the snow. It's just really hard, and then also like a snowstorm is really hard. Alright, so here we are in material preview mode. My character is scaled like the real world, so we're just going to move the camera and our character to the right location. I don't want it to be that big on the screen. I'll probably go for this mountain peak somewhere around the middle of our frame, and then our character can be somewhere here, maybe off to the side along a third of our screen, and then have something interesting here as well, but we'll see. Just move it back to the original place right now. We might be able to find something later. Alright, so I think we can make this snow that our character is walking in, and to do that I'm just going to add in a plane and scaling it up to 25 meters, I guess, just so our character can stand on it, and then we can extrude it to the height that we want our snow to be. So I think something like this should be good. And now we can just add in a lot of loop cuts. Let's see, 36, and do the same on the other side. And now we can subdivide these, but I don't want them on the edges here. We can always shrink it down if we have too much, which I think we do. So just shrink it down to something like this and apply the scaling so you have even more detail. Maybe even move it, rotate it. As long as it looks good in the camera angle, I don't really care about how big it is. We want the most amount of polygons here, so we can paint in the path that our character is walking in. Alright, so this will be our snow layer. And I've already made a nice snow shader, which you can check out on the node-based channel. And I'm just going to append it in and use it here. So click on new material, call it snow, then go over to the shader editor, and then just append in the node group. Now we can add in snow, and we also have displacement, which is really cool. And now we can preview it with the scene world disabled for some default lighting, and this is looking pretty weird. Let's see what's going wrong. So the scaling on the side is wrong, but that doesn't really matter since we aren't going to be seeing that anyway. We can make it a little bit more white. We also need to enable our displacement, which looks pretty cool, but not that intense. So we can change it a little bit, add more scaling, and this is looking a lot better. Nice snow. For the mountain, I'm going to make a shader and we'll do it together. So one thing I always like about mountains is snow on one side of the mountain and not on the other side. And we can do that really easily by grabbing the vector and then just separating it into the different channels. So I'm going to add in a geometry and add in a separate XYZ and then just preview the values, mostly like X and Y. And then just see which ones give the nicest result. So I think the normal in this case just gives us nice snow on one side and not the other. Subdivide this one more time, see if we can handle it. And I think we can. And now let's just do a little bit of math and multiply it to make this a little bit more intense. I think it's better if we map range it, to be honest, just so it doesn't go above 1. Just want this to be a factor. So from min, we can do 0, and then from max, do something like this. And maybe even rotate a little bit, since most of the snow is on this side and we won't really see it from here. Oh, we don't even need to do it with an empty. I was thinking too difficult. So this works. Just vector rotate and then separate it and find a nice angle. I think 20. Just so we get some nice snow going coming here. All right, so this is our factor for our snow. So we can add in our snow shader from before and then just mix it in with a stone shader. So for now, I'll do a black principled PCF. Then use the map range as our factor. Let's see how that looks. And we need to switch it around, of course. We always have to switch it around. And that is looking pretty good, but not very defined. So maybe make this even tighter. We'll make this a new snow shader and call it snow mountain. And this is of course our mountain material, our rock, but we're going to add that later. Let's see how much detail we can add to this, because the scaling is probably pretty off. So let's do 25 and get rid of the subsurface and transmission, because we don't really want to be looking through the mountain, and making it a lot wider, of course, it makes it look much better. We can add a little bit more to the snow mask. So for now we only have the normal, but we can also do something like a geometry node and see if we can find a pointiness. And it's really subtle, but you can see it. So we're going to add in a math node. Set this to something like power. That might work with defining the edges, but it doesn't seem to really want to. Maybe a map range node will help. And that does help. And as you can see, we can kind of get like the crevices where water would flow and maybe snow would accumulate. And we can then add that into the existing snow shader or snow mask by just adding it together. So a math right here. Add those two together and hit clamp because we don't want it to go above 1. So let's see without and then with. And that does add a little bit, which is great. We want to add little bits at a time, but no matter how small the change you make, it's always going to be visible in the end result. So we might want to add something to this again, maybe an ambient occlusion. Let's see how that looks. Just tick inside and then with a math node. This does work with power, I think. Yeah, so if you just power it to like infinity, something like 100, you will see that a lot of snow will be on the bottom, which makes sense because the incline is less steep. And then we can just throw this into a clamp for good practice and add it together again with the other add node. And that is really cool, but it is a little bit too much. So maybe we could power a little bit more or just decrease the distance, but no, it seems like we need more distance even. So what we can do is just get a noise texture and multiply it or mix it with this, and then just set it to linear light, which will take away some of those details. So this is without and this is with. We can increase the scaling to something like 25, increase the detail, the roughness a little bit as well. That is looking really cool, even with the shiny mountain. So all right, let's add in a little bit of rock. We can just join these together into a panel and then rename this to snow mask then just tidy it up a little bit. And I'll try to see if I have a rock shader that I can reuse from a different project, but I don't think so. It looks like I only have a road shader, which I think we can modify to work with us on the mountain. So let's delete the principled BCF for the rock and then just append in that road material. And I'll just add in the asphalt here and we'll call this rock and modify this. So previewing, it's at a really low scale. It should be at something like this. So now we have an asphalt mountain where you can park your car. This is the American dream. Adjust this a little bit. Let's see how that looks. And yeah, I think for a background that is actually pretty good, even with these weird normals going on. I don't think we should increase it too much. You won't be able to tell. I guess you can. That sucks. Now I have to fix it. Yeah, this is looking pretty cool. And this is all done with like one image texture that I had already made. A snow shader that I had already made. So it's really easy to set up something like this. Now we need to compensate with the snow again, or just move down the mountain, I guess. And that is looking really cool already. I also think that we need to give our character a little bit more white clothing. Seems appropriate. I've also made a video on the Notebase channel how to make digi camo, so we're going to be reusing that. And you might see a trend of me reusing materials here, and I think that's a really important thing. We as artists make a lot of materials or shaders or whatever you want to call it, but the idea about nodes is that you can reuse them. I almost never do, so I want to make a point of that. Just reuse your nodes. I always try to make them as procedural as I can and as easy to use as I can. So now on our character, let's rename him character. Let's rename this snow. I almost never rename, but it's important, I guess. We can delete this empty. We don't need it. Yeah, this is pretty much all I need for now. And in the materials, I'm looking for whatever is on his outfit. So let's select a face and it should automatically select the material that I need. So here we have our suit, which has a lot of image textures, and we're just going to delete that. We don't need it. Add in a material output and just work from there. I'm going to add in my digi camo. All right, so here we have it. Make it white, even more white. Make this a little bit more blue. And now you have a nice pattern, maybe darker. Yeah, I like darker. And now we need a fabric on top of this as well, which luckily I've already made as well. You can get all of these by following the tutorials on the Notebase channel, which I have to make more. I've been slacking for the past 2 months, or you can buy them on my Gumroad. But yeah, expect more Notebase tutorials soon. Let's add in fabric. And this apparently also has the digicamo already in it. It shouldn't be. And now our character is looking pretty snowy. He should blend in. That's the point. I feel like we should do the boots as well. Just make them white rubber, and the gloves as well. And I think that will be fine. Let's now add in the sky. So we can just disable the scene world here. We have no lighting whatsoever. I guess we can start with an environment light because we are going to have that anyway. Do this one over the clouds. No, I'll just do the normal sky texture. Oh, that is so bright, but I love it. Yeah, this already is looking way better for some reason. Should we make it dustier? It does add a lot of atmosphere, but not that dusty. Something like 5, maybe 2, 4. 4 is a nice one. As I know 6 makes it a lot bluer, but in this case, I think 2 is fine. Yeah. All right, so the sun should be from the left from a quick conversation with ChatGPT. These are things that you might hear from people that are really critiquing your work. So just take them into account if you don't want to deal with those people. I'm one of them. All right, let's add in a snowstorm now. Make this a volumetric. So add in a volume scatter, put it into the volume. And then now I have these phases, which I have no idea how to use. So I'll just stick to the default. All right, I want the snowstorm to be mostly on the ground. It's not going to really be a snowstorm, more like snow that's picked up by the wind. So I want a gradient texture just so we can add in these texture coordinates. And then we'll just use the generated coordinates and separate it by XYZ. Because this still gives us a gradient. So I have no idea why you would use a gradient texture if this does the exact same thing. But with separate XYZ, you can actually rotate it really easily. So this is just better, in my opinion. All right, let's move it up a little bit. Let's invert this. And then let's just add in a noise texture and mix these two together. in the same way. Set this to linear light, which just adds in detail to the gradient here. Oh, don't forget to multiply by your desired density. And this looks not that great. Let's see what's actually happening. That is actually looking pretty okay, but I think we just need to subtract some more from the inside. So I guess darken and then multiply it by 0, 2. Yeah, something like this. This is what I want. So just limit it a little bit more. And yeah, it just makes it a little bit more hazy, which is exactly what I want. I'll turn on denoising. All right, so to add in a little bit more of that fog, that is more visible, I guess, we can add in fog textures. There's no great fog texture on the internet, so I guess we'll make our own. So instead of making a volumetric, we'll add in a plane right here. And we'll make a nice alpha here. Fog texture. So we'll just do a transparent DCF, mix it in with a diffuse BSDF. Roughness to, yeah, I think 1 is fine. Mix these together. And with our factor, we can decide our alpha. So add in a noise texture into the factor, something like 2.5. And then a gradient texture as well to spherical. And then we need to adjust this to the object. And then we can multiply these together just so the fog doesn't end abruptly when the mesh ends. Then add in a map range node to kind of limit the noise texture again, add in more detail, and then change the scaling. We could also probably like mix our noise texture with the gradient texture and set this to linear light. No, I think the normal mix works pretty well actually. Yeah, there we have it. We can bring it over to our scene, scale it up, rotate it, and then scale it along like one axis to kind of make it a little bit longer, and this can obscure our character. We can even make it more intense by adding in another map range and then just making sure that we set the from max to something lower, so it's a little bit more intense. But I think R1 is fine. Let's see this without our volume cube. So these are the planes that we've added in. You can see what they do. Make sure to keep this one object, don't merge them, otherwise the texture will break. But this isn't really a tutorial to begin with, so that shouldn't really matter. But yeah, here we have it, our volumetrics. But I do want this focal length to be a little bit longer to make it look like we are actually following our character. All right, yeah, okay. Let's just give this the mountain material. What's it called? We didn't give it a name. Very good of us. You know what? Just duplicate the mountain and then just move it over here. Scale it down. Scale it down. Then just unsubdivide it a bunch of times. And now we have a nice foreground. Very easy. And this is what makes snowy render so hard. Never works the way you want it. Let's fix the mountain a little bit more. I don't know what's going on there. Change the scaling for the, yeah, that looks a little bit better. Okay, now for the sky, it doesn't blend in that well. I think that's my problem, but I also think I can do that with a mist pass. Let's just take a look at the mist pass here. So what the mist pass will do is it shoots out a line from the camera, and then anything that's really close, it will be black. Anything that's really far away will be white. And it's really nice to like isolate our character that you can see here. And then we can use that in compositing like a fake mist. So let's go to the world properties. Then we can change the mist pass here. Set the start to something a little bit further, something where our character is mostly black, think something like this. And then the end should be pretty far away since we have a really far scene. I want to be able to see the mountain a little bit, but I also want it to blend in with the sky, so we can actually blend it in with the sky in compositing as well. So just fine tune it until you find, yeah, I think this is probably what I want, where the top is blending in with the sky almost, but not enough. We can see the outline of the mountain. It doesn't disappear fully into the sky, but it does almost. And that gives a pretty snowstormy effect. We can also see this in the viewport if you just hide this cube and then go over to somewhere. I think in the camera, probably viewport display. Limits, it's the limits, yeah. So here we have the start, and then all the way over here is the end. That's at the peak of the mountain. We can definitely use that for compositing. We should be ready for compositing. I don't know what I would add to this. I think we just render and see what we can do in compositing. If it's not enough, we come back. So let's see, render it at 4K. I'll do a OpenEXR, float half, and we'll do DWAA. And yeah, we'll just render this. Make sure to turn it off before we render. Now hit the F12, and I'll be back when it's rendered. So let's just drag in our images. So render one and mist one. Let's drag it in here. And you can already tell that it looks a little bit different. And that's because the ACES transform is not on here. Let's just set this to sRGB linear. and then the output should be our rec 709, and now it looks normal. We can hit P to go into full screen, and I'll save this as well. We can drag on our render 1 mist, and for some reason this is just the same image. I think I did something wrong. Just reload this, and yeah, there it is. Nice. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll throw in an adjustment clip and go over to the color grading tab. Then in here I'll disable the clips and the gallery. Don't really need it. And in here I'll just throw in a white balance and just color pick the sky, which should be white in our case, and that corrected just a tiny amount. Then with Alt S we can add in a serial node, just rename this white balance, and this one we can name mid detail. We can add in some more detail or take some away, and because this is a snowy environment, I think we should take some away in this case, just a little, something like -10 or -20. That looks pretty okay. I want to add in some grain. Then I also want some vignetting, so I'll add that in here as well. We'll do that with a mask here. Add in a circle, then just scale it to fit and increase the softness. Maybe rotate it a little bit. I always like doing that for some reason. And then with the curves here, we can make this a little bit darker. But we need to invert it right here. So now we can make the edges darker. This is without and this is with. Pretty harsh. You can get carried away if you don't look at it, the before and after. So maybe like this. Yeah, definitely you have to re-render something went wrong on the render side. This shouldn't happen. Something else I always like to add in is halation. It just makes it look a little bit warmer, which I don't really want for this one. So just keep it to a minimum. Then after that, add in a glow, just a slight glow. That is not slight in the slightest. All right. Let's change the threshold. And the spread, let's change it to something really high. Then the gain to something really low. This is without and this is with glow. Yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. Add in another node. What would this be? I think maybe something like this watercolor effect would be really cool to mix in with this in some way, like a global blend. Just make it look a little bit softer. And I think that's it for like the color grading, compositing. Well, not the compositing, we are still going to add in some more things. So we can look for some nice elements that we can add in, like some snow, some dust maybe footage of a little bit of a like snowstorm, if we can find that.
The next day.
It's actually a couple of days later, but let's just take a look at what I did in DaVinci Resolve. I did a lot off screen and it kind of just continued working without talking. So I thought I would just re-record and show you what I did. So here are my layers. We have the mist layer, which I'll just disable all of them and show you one by one what everything does. So this is the mist, which is screened on here, and this just makes for a really nice blend between the mountain and the sky, just like they talked about inside of Blender. But with screen you kind of add it on there, but not entirely, because add looks a little bit different like this because it's really bright. Screen just does it in a smart way. So I suggest using that for mist passes. All right, then the color grading, which you've already seen. And I made it a lot softer with the watercolor, which I really like. As you can see, I got rid of a lot of the detail to kind of make the snow appear a lot less bumpy than it did in the render. And I could have done this in Blender by just bumping down the normal, but I think with this watercolor effect, the colors mixed a lot nicer, and I probably couldn't have made it look this soft inside of Blender. As you can see here as well, it just looks like there's a snowstorm going on and a lot of snow is picked up by the wind. All right, and then I added in some snow here as well, just some classic snow I got off of footage grade this was. And then on top of this, I've added in a little bit faster falling snow, and these videos have alpha, so I didn't have to blend them. I can just use normal, and then it has an alpha mask. On top of this, I also rendered out the mist that we made in Blender procedurally as an image, and then just scaled it and placed it on top of my image here as well. Two of these were just to cover up some of the left and right side of the screen, because I wanted it to blend in more, and then one in the middle to kind of hide the boots, because I didn't think they looked that great. Let's try and see. If I zoomed in here, this just looked a little bit weird, so Yeah, I wanted to go for a little bit of mist obscuring that. And then on top of that, I also had these fingerprints, which I thought would be pretty cool for like the lens effects. So I added one on there, which I subtracted, and then added another one on there with linear light. So it darkened overall, but it lightened the fingerprints, which gave a really cool effect, I think. Then on top of that, I added in a little bit of gamma correction to show a little bit more of the mountain and midtones. And then last but not least, I added in a film gate, which got rid of everything that we shouldn't be able to see in this 16:9 with ultra wide. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. And please leave a comment if you made it this far saying, let's do, and I'll heart your comment. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.